Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Rice and Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Daniel Lee, who's the CEO of Marble. Marble helps property owners manage the properties from afar, and the platform handles rent collection and maintenance in addition to remote showings, collecting $50 per unit per month, significantly undercutting competitors' pricing. Daniel is an alum of University of Washington, and had earlier worked for Facebook. A big thanks to Aaron Michael from 1984 Ventures for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So you had great start. You worked in Facebook, but what made you get into this world of startups, and why did you want to start with Marble?
Yeah. I think, going through college or high school, when I first started programming, early in high school and middle school, it was always a lot of fun. But halfway through high school was when this period where tech really started to become a focal point in the world, and everybody wanted to get into these big tech companies as a status symbol. So I think I started riding that train, but I always had that kernel of kind of an itch of wanting to do something on my own. The internet is just so freeing in that anybody anywhere in the world can do whatever they want. I had a great time at Facebook. I learned a ton. A part of the messenger team. Scaling to billions of messages a day is not something you really get to experience anywhere else. But then after a couple of years, me and one of my close college friends decided to go on our own journey. And when we were kind of throwing around ideas and introspecting what type of ideas to try to kind of approach, we had this crazy story where in the home that we lived in during college, the roof started leaking.
Okay.
And it took our property manager 18 months to fix it. And the entire time we're like threatening legal action, and they just don't reply to our emails.
Oh,
And so when we were like discussing ideas, there has to be something here, right? This is a terrible experience for one of the prime customers, and a huge share of your wallet spend throughout your entire life. And so that's kind of how we got started down this journey. And that was quite a couple of years ago now. So yeah.
interesting. I was a on deck fellow, which was a company started by Eric Torenberg, who's also VC at Village Global, and he said that starting in Ivy League college or university is a status signal to job seekers. But he said you can work in a big company for a couple of years, but then you should drop out. And I think that's something which you did. You have that signal in your resume that you work for a great company, and then you dropped out. But in the hindsight, what do you think, especially with a lot of stories coming out for the people who are getting fired from big companies? What advice would you give to graduates of 2023? Should they work in a startup, or do you think they should work in a big company and then maybe branch out of starting their own thing or working in a startup?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, we've been very lucky and fortunate in our startup journey that we've like built incredible relationships, and gone through kind of gotten accolades that also build signal. But right out of college, you don't have very much signal. Engineering is unique in that you can kind of test for it relatively easily, during engineering interviews. But I would say, like, in terms of uh, how applicable my experience at Facebook was, it's very, very minimal to the startup world. If anything, it's kind of unproductive. There's a lot of things you have to unlearn, and things that you took for granted at big companies. And so, if your genuine passion and your genuine kind of goal is to create something on your own, like, I wouldn't stress out too much about trying to find a nice and cushy job at a big company. But not everybody wants to, work 100 hours a week and for very little pay. But if you do have this kind of kernel of ambition to, try to push the universe and see if it can push back, I would suggest, like, just going for it. And something that I undervalued during my time at Facebook and in college is, like, if you're passionate about something, and you show that like you're willing to put it out there and put everything on the table, people are really willing to help you.
Mm,
I thought I would be all alone, but even like cold emailing these very big execs, they'll respond if you just show that you have passion and you want to do something interesting.
mm, Got interesting. And coming back to Marble, um, and it's like a chicken and egg situation. What comes first? Does the supply come first, or demand?
So in our case, supply definitely came first. In the US, there's already a decent amount of property listing sites for rentals. You can kind of find like the original like Craigslist, and then you have Zillow and Zumper, and but it's interesting in that none of them have a majority market share. They're kind of like titans battling out. So we started on the supply side, kind of just cold calling owners,
Mm,
seeing if they had problems with their property manager and trying to get them to, give us a shot. We used to, drive out, me and my co-founder Dan used to drive out to all of our new customers and, shake their hands.
mm,
And they were always blown away that they were only paying us $50 a month for this amazing service.
Interesting. And I was fortunate to be part of SaaS companies as well as marketplaces in at a very early stage. But how did you get your first 10 landlords, and what were some of the unscalable things or scalable things or hacky things you did to get to your those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, it was a blend of a lot of different things. The easy ones of performance marketing, did a decent amount of things in the beginning. We would like cold call listings on like Zillow. Rental properties are unique in that like the owner puts their phone number, right? So there's kind of no question of like whether or not this is the owner's phone number. So you just pick up the phone and call them. It's like, are you using a property manager? Are you enjoying them? And so we got leads that way. And of course, like writing blogs, building tooling, and kind of just word of mouth as well for our existing customers.
Got it. Yeah. No, it reminded of my days at Hyber, which is a UK based marketplace where we would reach out with Spare Room and Open Rent, which are the equivalents of the Zillows, and you just add the phone numbers of the landlords. They just call them up. So yeah, it reminded me of
Exactly.
those days. And I wanted to understand how much inventory do you own, and which are the markets that you started off with, and are you currently present in?
Yeah, so we're at around 800 units under management across the country. Of course, one of our original market of Seattle is still one of our biggest ones, but we kind of see interesting things happening in the Texas Triangle, right? So Austin, Dallas, Houston. That's just been a really hot real estate market the past 2, 3 years. Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, parts of California are the big ones that come up in my head.
Got it. And uh and so looks like if you have 800 units, you are at an ARR of close to $500,000, right? Um and you do help out the landlords, but and where you just charge $50. So what are some of the things which a landlord can get in those $50 from you?
Yeah, we kind of bucket it into three main categories. The first one is our end-to-end leasing engine. The second one is 24/7 maintenance. And the third one is rent collection. And going through those, the most interesting one is the end-to-end leasing engine. Essentially, when you need to find a tenant, you order a smart lock from us. And then when you put this smart lock onto the door, we're actually able to generate one-time use codes without Wi-Fi, right? So it's done over Bluetooth. And so essentially we'll post your listing out to Zillow, Zumper, Trulia, HotPads, a bunch of other different ones. The leads will come in, they'll ask our system questions. And the interesting thing about these questions is that the vast majority of them can be automated. And so we're able to just classify them and give the answer almost immediately back to the inquirer. And then when they're ready, they find a time to schedule a tour, and then we actually verify their ID. So using some of the technology that a lot of banks have built out for KYC, we do a facial scan, we scan your government issued ID, and then you get a 1 hour passcode to enter the home and take a tour. And then it's, one click after that, you submit an application, and then it goes into lease signing and deposit and move in. So that's kind of this end to this like almost completely automated leasing solution that we have. So we've turned finding a tenant into a software problem, essentially. 24/7 maintenance is definitely sometimes a bit hairier. We have a 24/7 operations center that is able to take calls at 3 a.m. if the pipe bursts. And we work with owners. You're able to set kind of maintenance limits in terms of how much you want to spend without any auto approval and things like that. And then the last one is rent collection, pretty standard. We do electronic ACH rent. We actually are able to accept money orders and things like that as well. So kind of the more antiquated methods, we have mechanisms to digitize those and things like that.
Got it. Interesting. And you talked about automating the process. So do you have AI and ML engineers who are trying to help you out, or have you outsourced the process? How are you trying to solve it?
So we kind of think of machine learning and all these new advances as just kind of different tools in a tool belt. So some of the tools that we use are built in-house, and then other ones that aren't feasible to build in house, like we use kind of OpenAI's GPT-3 sometimes and things
Oh,
like that. But we do like to prefer things that are built in-house because we do have a lot of data now internally that allows us to really refine these models. And they're kind of just expensive to refine if you don't own the actual model itself.
got it. And you also talked about 24/7 support. Are you using AI ML to solve this problem, or do you actually have humans, who are responding to those calls at 3 a.m.?
So for the maintenance, yes, we do have humans. We haven't yet gotten to the point where we can have a kind of an automated agent
Yeah.
talking over the phone, though there have been some impressive demos that I've seen from startups. But I don't think the technology is quite there yet in terms of latency and just processing power. So yeah, we definitely have actual human staff for the maintenance side.
Got it. And Daniel, I worked in early stage startups, and I think what makes startups different is execution. But how important is the speed of execution versus the quality? And how do you think speed of execution is more important than the quality?
Um, I think quality, I like to think of it as like the thing that we're trying to optimize is speed on the 6-month time horizon, right? So when there's a degradation in quality that causes a decrease in speed on the 6-month time horizon, then that's not good, right? But at the very end of the day, it is speed that matters. And I like to say kind of that time horizon in terms of just like trying to rationalize when to pay off tech debt and when not to. We definitely, speed is really the only thing that startups have over incumbents. And if you don't have that, you don't have any advantage over incumbents and bigger companies. And so you really just have to lean into it. And there will be bugs, but there's also, you can also be really quick at discovering and fixing bugs. Maybe this just comes from my time at Facebook where, everyone's just screaming, move fast and break things. But I just know that there are kind of processes and mechanisms you can use to actually scale speed. And I've kind of seen them at the other side. And so I definitely want to kind of inject that into our startups culture as well.
Got it. And do you think at times you need to go slow to ensure things are perfect? Like when do you think which department would you think should focus on quality, like be it sales or product or design? Whom do you think could get more impacted if quality is not there?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we know uh, that needs quality is when there's a very long feedback cycle to like when things will go wrong. Um, like if you have a feature, say, like you're changing the some of the marketing, the content on the landing page, and you know precisely very quickly whether or not it's good or bad, like you can kind of fire from the hip and be fast there. But for example, if we're changing some of our models for how to respond to certain types of questions that don't show up very often, if you push a change that's like regressive in that area, it might take a week or 2 or 4 weeks to really show up in the data. And so then you really do have to kind of measure twice and cut once to make sure that you aren't just wasting months of time on this feedback cycle.
Got it. And uh, and how do you think about focus and prioritization, since you raised a seed round, you may be looking at the next round of funding, but how do you ensure that you're focused?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. We're kind of interesting in that our type of product is like kind of three products bundled in one. And so we're definitely more spread thin than kind of the average startup. So in terms of just focus, I just focus very heavily on the customer's problem and how big of a pain point it is for that customer at any given point in time. And I think like where we've fallen down in terms of losing focus is when we start to increase the scope of the customer or kind of change the customer persona or be like, oh, this person also could be an interesting customer, but that's kind of different than our core customer. That's when we've kind of lost sight of focus and started to build products that don't really matter for our core customer. So that's kind of how I view focus, is more focusing in on a very, very specific type of persona that you're trying to serve.
Got it. And uh, uh, you know, you've been able to build a good brand. What are some of the biggest mistakes founders make when they focus on branding? What have you learned when it comes to the brand?
Um, I think the reason why you do something resonates a lot with people. Um, People really don't like it, from what my experience is, like when you just want to build something to like make some money. I think like we're interesting in that like our company was founded on this desire to like change how people rent and live in their home. And I was surprised by how much that resonated with owners as well. That like there was this intuition that if you have an amazing experience for your renters, you can also make more money financially on the owner side, that I never really had to explain. And most of our customers just intuitively understand. And I think that was like a big, big learning for me, is that like people really, um, especially for a startup, and when you start using a startup's product, you're not really using the product for what it is today, but what it could be and what it could mean in the future a lot of the times. And so like, yeah, we have to solve our customers and what they do today, but it can be a lot more rough than I imagined, because they see the progress and why we're building what we're building.
Got it. And do you think uh, people can hate your branding even if it is good? Like, uh, if you're not focusing on the right persona, do you think you need to be very clear on your branding, or do you think you can be generic uh and build something which people will want?
Um, yeah, that's an interesting question. Um, I think I think you definitely have to tailor your marketing to a specific persona in mind. Um, we definitely like run experiments trying to show different types of marketing to different types of personas and things like that, based on detected ways of how they found out about us and things like that. Um, but in general, I think like marketing just has to, from the sense that I get, is like from our experience, the a startup's funnel is just like so small and usually pretty concentrated, especially if your funnel comes from word of mouth growth. any incremental person will probably look like the last person. And so like really being able to focus in and like, one of the tricks that I used was just asking our owners how they would describe our product in their own words. And then we kind of just push that as marketing. And that really helps get this flywheel going.
Nice.
I'm sure when, that well plateaus, then it's like another exercise of like, how do you expand the marketing to different verticals? But if you see some semblance of the marketing working, I would just double down on it until it kind of stops working.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And obviously, when you're small, you got to focus and concentrate. But when do you think you can expand your marketing efforts and go wide? Do you think after you raise your seed round, you've been able to expand, or are you still focused on the key channels?
I mean, we definitely test out other channels, but we know like the ones that work, and then we know the ones that like kind of, long term will probably be there. Um, in terms of kind of expanding the different types of personas, the interesting thing for us is like it kind of gets dragged out of us. They're just like owners that come to us asking if we support a certain thing that is outside of our core persona. A common one actually is like student housing. We typically just tell them like this isn't well supported. There are a lot of operational playbooks that haven't been written on our side, and just kind of put that out there. And like if they still want to use us, so be it. And then maybe that develops into another persona. But we just kind of let it be very organic because we're still relatively focused on our core persona right now that we know works. But I think like there's a general theme of like this emergent phenomenon where like people start using your product in ways that aren't intended originally. I think that's very important to pay attention to because there's a decent amount of activation energy there. And so when you see that, it typically means that they have a pants on fire problem as well.
Mm, got it. And I want to talk about team, right? So and I've asked this question a few times as founders. I wanted to understand your take, because you move from a very early stage and you've raised pre-seed and seed. Do you think you should hire a B player, or and then get an A player, or should you wait for an A player so that you always have a great team in the beginning?
Um, I'm a believer that like uh you definitely we definitely waited for 8 players. Like there were some very very rough months where we did not have enough people operationally, and so we were kind of everything was on fire. But I think like B players will work for a couple of months and then like they kind of start fading off. And then especially if you start giving them hiring responsibilities, the kind of culture starts to disseminate, and it's something that kind of eats you from the inside. And so I think like finding A players that are dedicated to your mission and believe in what you're doing is incredibly important. And like if you find one person like that, that's worth 3, 4, 5 B players because of just how much leverage they can have.
Yeah, got it. And yeah, and what is your thoughts on building that safety net for your employees so that they can uh, openly discuss and debate with you without feeling that their jobs might be in danger?
Um, That's an interesting question. Me and my co-founder debate a lot during our team meetings. So I think that really helps, like, when other people see how we interact, they kind of, jump in as well. And I'm also very, very transparent that like, I have like, I think it's called like the filing cabinet concept behind like my ideas and thoughts is that like, they're like pieces of paper and folders in a filing cabinet, and at any point they can be swapped out. And so like always like kind of be open to changing your mind and things like that. And just knowing that like A players will have very good ideas, and they might not sound good at first, but if you kind of go a couple of levels deeper, they a lot of the times at this point, a lot of the members of our team know a lot more about what's going on day to day than I do, and so I kind of constantly say, based on what I know, which isn't very much, and decreasing every passing day, this is like, what I think we should do, and then they kind of just argue back.
Mm. Got interesting. And how do you manage and communicate underperformance, especially when it comes to you know uh, a sales guy not meeting his targets, or the product team not really coming out with a great product? How do you manage that?
Um, I mean, I'll caveat this with like, I don't think I'm very good at this. um, it's definitely something that I think about a lot, and I think it's just about making it very crystal clear what your expectations are and where people are falling short, as well as like kind of uh, at the scale we're at, like I've been able to serve in every single role that we have at the company, which is like advantageous in that like I know viscerally how hard or easy something is. And like, I sometimes if there's even data to like, 12 months ago of when I was doing it. And it's like, okay, these were the kind of metrics that we were hitting back then, now we're not hitting them. Like, why are we kind of not doing that? And then, as long as ideas come back that are reasonable and, given a certain timeline, we'll try to fix them. I think the much more kind of tricky type of underperformance is like cultural misfits, are hard to really put, because to me it definitely feels like an attack on character, even though like a part of me inside knows that like people can definitely change. It's just hard on the time scale that startups operate on to
Yeah.
change in a relatively fast period of time. And so I guess like it's hard. It's definitely hard.
Okay. Okay. Got it. And how long would you give an underperformer? I mean, somebody who's not performing. Would give them a timeline like 3 months, 6 months, move them out, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think like 3 months might even be a bit, too long. I think like by the time you're starting to have doubts, a lot of the times, unless it fixes itself very quickly, it's like already too late.
Right.
Especially if multiple people start to have the doubts, then like, you're starting to really walk a thin line. But there's definitely, we have experiences with people that, seem not too good in the beginning, especially when they're onboarding. But it's a byproduct of them being shy or timid and not wanting to ask the right questions. And so I would say like the onboarding process is also something that we focus on. But then like once we see a level of performance, and then especially if it drops off, then that's like relatively concerning and things like that. But yeah, so I would say like definitely give people like 2, 3, 4 months in the beginning when they're onboarding.
Yeah.
But once they're in steady state, I think the modulations can be more closely monitored.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Interesting. And interestingly, before the call, you mentioned you not come from a real estate experience, and I worked at the marketplace called Oyo Rooms, where the founder said that most of the team should not be from real estate, and they should. I came from a SaaS background, but was it you know uh, was it helpful not to come from an experience and have no biases with you, or do you consciously also make decisions to hire people outside of the industry? Just want to take your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we make a concerted effort to hire people specifically from the industry.
Okay.
Um, I think generally like we definitely look for slope, right? So like people that are willing to have the horsepower to really push through certain things, as well as they just learn incredibly fast.
Right.
Um, real estate isn't rocket science.
Yeah.
It is very quirky in a lot of ways. But like my kind of preferred mechanism is leaning on people that I know are experienced in real estate and asking them a lot of questions. Not necessarily hiring them, but just kind of peppering them with questions and letting them know like, oh, this is what I see day to day on the ground, and like, is this something you've seen before? Is this like a novel phenomenon based on our type of product that we're offering? And so I would say I lean much more on like external experience versus hiring it and trying to kind of bring it in house. When I know like, the people that we hire have the ability to learn really quickly, and then like the foundation of being and knowing how to operate in a startup, I think is much more important than knowing the industry.
Interesting. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Um, I've been reading a lot of Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I don't really like read like specific business books. There's like Michael Porter's business books. The Andrew Chen book that he recently released is really interesting. I really like the little anecdotes and like quirks of like the secrets of like how these huge companies got founded. It just like humanizes them a lot. But I think like I don't think there's too much value necessarily out of there because of but it's just kind of fun to read.
Yeah, the cold start problem, right?
Yeah, the cold start problem.
Okay, got it. We'll put that in the show notes. And if I know it's been just 2 years, but if you could go back in time when you started building Marble, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
I would say like something that I've noticed about myself is that um, I swerve too hard into advice from people that I respect and that I like. So to kind of give a concrete example of this, YC has this mantra of like do things that don't scale. And I actually sometimes think that we took that a bit too far. That we'd actually be a bit further along if uh, we were just like, okay, we have a lot of learnings here. We don't need to keep scaling operationally. Let's just kind of understand our problems and build out the product and the engineering side to know how to solve these problems, at scale and faster. And so that's kind of this like tricky balance that I don't have a good answer to of like when do we go one way or another. But I would say like we biased, like in hindsight, we biased very far into like pushing operationally, like a lot further than really the team could handle. And it caused a lot of burnout and a lot of stress that doesn't necessarily seem like it needed to happen. But then, kind of the other side of that is like, maybe that's what's necessary to really find what's important to build. So in hindsight, hindsight's 2020, but seeing that would definitely be something that would change, if I were to do it over again.
Got it. And do you have any favorite online tool, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Well, we use Zoom a lot. Slack is starting to become a bit, messy for me. But I use a lot of, email. Superhuman has been, a godsend for my email inbox. Yeah, yeah.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. And Daniel, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Marble?
If anyone's interested, you feel free to email me, dli@rentmarble.com, or use our 24/7 support chat, and we have special escalation paths to get to me. But email is definitely a lot more controllable these days for me.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. Daniel, thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.